Welcome back to the Oilers Fanatic. My name is Patrick,
My name is Toph.
and you are watching episode 2 of Rig 72. Well, welcome back to the show, guys. Off, how was your week?
It was great. And the highlight of my week was all the positive feedback that we got, and all of the suggestions that we got to improve the podcast. I thought that was really nice, and so thank you all out there for watching and for giving us some feedback.
Absolutely. We're going to go over some of that fan feedback a bit later today. We're going to start off with our first segment that we call the Oilers This Week. On Monday, the Oilers got everything started by signing Jake Virtanen and Jason Demers to professional tryout contracts. Now, one of these signings was obviously very controversial in oil country, and that signing was Jake Virtanen. Jake Virtanen has faced sexual assault charges, had his contract bought out by the Vancouver Canucks. I think it's safe to say most Oilers fans don't want Virtanen in oil country as a member of the Edmonton Oilers. We'll see what happens. The Oilers aren't obviously going to hand him anything. He has to earn a spot in camp. It would probably be on the third or fourth line. Ken Holland has specifically said he was not seen as a top six player. Off, what are your thoughts on the Oilers possibly bringing in Jake Virtanen on a contract following training camp?
I mean, it's a really complicated situation, right? And we all know that it's complicated. So he was acquitted. So to a certain extent, you just want to give him a second chance, right? If the acquittal is on the level and it went right and it's true, then he deserves a second chance. I think where everybody starts wondering, including myself, is we know that the system doesn't, and the systems, because we got two countries here, doesn't handle cases like that very well. And so we've even got doubt now. And so it's not, guilty until proven innocent so much as do we want that possibility on the team? Do we want to associate ourselves with the sniff of that sort of controversy? And yeah, so I've got big feelings about that. But that's the long and short of it is, like, however you feel about that, it's probably valid in some way, because you either believe that he was acquitted and he deserves a second chance, or you believe that the system's not well equipped to actually acquit someone, and the doubt is enough for you to not really want to associate yourself with him.
Exactly. I think I can see it from both sides. Like, you have to be innocent until proven guilty. He did receive the not guilty from the jury, so yes, you got to give a person a second chance, but I can see some people just, they don't care. They don't want anything to do with him. And you know what? At the end of the day, the Oilers may not end up having much to do with him at all. It's going to be 2 weeks here. If Virtanen can come in and make the team better, I'm okay with them giving him a 1 year, $750K deal. But if he doesn't earn his spot, then thank you for your time. Move along. I shouldn't say it's exactly the same situation as Evander Kane, but it's similar, right? If Evander Kane can come in, help the team, obviously Jake Virtanen is no Evander Kane. They're not even the same stratosphere talent-wise. No. But if Jake Virtanen can come in and help the team in a positive way, I'm for that. But I'm also perfectly happy with the Oilers saying, thank you very much, go on your way, if the Oilers can't find a spot for him. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Thoughts,
so last week's conversation got me thinking about the Duncan Keith issue as well, because Duncan Keith was involved in a team that had very bad things happen. And I actually went down the rabbit hole reading what Duncan Keith had said, what other people have said, and it's that I think is closer to the same situation where you either believe him that he really didn't know, or you don't. And it's kind of up to each person to decide which side they believe. And it's not a matter of guilt or innocence. It's a matter of, we're all very emotionally invested in the team. And so when bad things might happen around the team, we feel very strongly. And whether that's right or wrong, we are emotionally invested. And I think that the team top to bottom knows that for better or worse, right? Yeah, so it is a complicated situation, and we definitely don't want to downplay it and tell people to get over it, because no, it's personal because it's your team, and it's personal because of your, you know, how you or what you believe about, you know, SA and all the very terrible things that happen around that. But with as with Evander Kane, sometimes a second chance gives people space to prove themselves, to prove that yes, that was a one-off. Yes, that was something that will not happen again. Whether or not you believe what, no matter what you believe happened the first time, giving them the second chance gives them the chance to prove that it at least won't happen again. And that goes for Virtanen, that goes for Duncan Keith, and that goes for Evander Kane. And yeah, they're all to a certain extent reclamation projects, which makes them cheaper. But also, like, yeah, yeah, right.
Kane's price sure went up fast. Not astronomical, but because I think he signed for about a $2 million cap hit last year, and now it's up to over $5 million, but which is a lot less than we thought it was going to be. But he's also getting that payment from San Jose, which kind of helps equal him out.
Yeah, and we know that if he gets in trouble, that's it. That, like, he's on a very short leash. We know that, and that I don't think that the Oilers should Evander Kane run into trouble again, whatever that trouble is. I don't think they'll hesitate to be like, okay, well, you were making our team better, but now you're making it worse, and you're done.
Yeah, but you have to be that way, like, especially with guys that have a past like that.
Yeah,
I mean, Evander Kane, all the credit to him. He's come in, he's kept his nose clean, he's been a good teammate. Every teammate in their exit interviews last summer told Ken Holland that they wanted Evander Kane to come back. So not every player is going to say that if he's trouble in the locker room or they didn't like having him around. So I think that just kind of shows how much Evander Kane was liked. Duncan Keith, very similar situation. He retired, but obviously Connor McDavid, right on down, would have loved to have Duncan Keith back. Virtanen, as I mentioned earlier, isn't even in the same stratosphere as Duncan Keith and Evander Kane, but he is in a similar situation where he's got the checkered past. He has to come in, earn a second chance. We'll see if it happens, but basically at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what he does on the ice, not off the ice. So if Jake Virtanen can perform on the ice over the next 2 weeks, earn a role, we'll see what happens. But like I said, could all be for nothing in 2 weeks' time. He could be packing his bags and on his way.
Yeah, and you mentioned Evander Kane's good in the room. That was one of the pieces of feedback that we got about Jason Demers. Do you want to talk about Jason Demers?
Yeah, I want to talk about Jason. I've talked about Jake Virtanen a lot over the last few weeks, so we'll see if something actually happens there. We did even mention him in episode 1 that we thought he actually wasn't coming in, but things shifted earlier this week, and he ends up getting a PTO. And Jason Demers, was the other guy brought in, a right shot defenseman. He'd be strictly in a depth role for the Oilers. He'd be the number 8 defenseman at best. Most teams carry 7 defensemen, so he'd kind of be the guy that would see time if there's an injury. Mm-hmm. And he's great in the locker room. I heard that mentioned on the Oil Stream podcast the other week. Tom Gazzola heard he's just a great guy in the locker room, really brings guys together. So for $750K, if Jason Demers can show that he can still perform, he represented Team Canada at the Beijing Olympics last year, spent a bit of time in the KHL. Obviously, the numbers offensively aren't there, but they've never really been there highly throughout his whole career. He's more of a strictly defensive defenseman, so he can come in a depth role for $750K. And like I said, worst comes to worst, he can be sent down to Bakersfield. So I'm be all for Jason Demers earning a contract if he can come in and do that. Your thoughts on Jason Demers?
Yeah, I still have very few thoughts on Jason Demers. But I mean,
from what you've heard, you like him,
yeah, from what I've heard, other people like him. And never underestimate the effect of that good team guy. There's stories every time anybody wins the cup of that guy that everyone ignores and thought stunk. He was really important because he kept us together. He kept us on point. He kept us going, right?
Yeah, and the Oilers need guys like that. Come like Duncan Keith was one of those guys, and he's gone now. So if a guy like Jason Demers could come in, especially on a cheap contract when you're so tight to the cap, he could be valuable in a lot of different ways for the Edmonton Oilers this season. So, and Jay Woodcroft has a history with him. He coached him when he was part of the San Jose Sharks. So that's kind of how Demers got this opportunity, because Woodcroft mentioned to Ken Holland to bring him in if he was willing. So I think he's got a decent chance of making the lineup. Like I said, he might not be here opening roster lineup, but he could be a guy that's called up for injury. So we'll see what happens there. So also this week, the Oilers officially announced Ryan Smith and Lee Fogelin will be the first two players inducted into the Oilers' new Hall of Fame on November 3rd when the Oilers take on the New Jersey Devils. So, Toph, how much do you know about Ryan Smith and Lee Fogelin as a new Oilers fan?
Very little. So I recognize Ryan Smith's name, and I think I only recognize it in text. So I wasn't sure if it was Smith or Smythe. Like, that's how much I know about Ryan Smith. I was wondering what you were doing over there. Yeah.
There's also a Smith jersey. I won't take it off the wall, but
so I'm interested to hear the chatter from up there, because obviously I plug myself into Oilers news. There is no passive Oilers news coming to me. So why did it start with Ryan Smith and Lee Fogelin?
Well, these are players that won't get their names retired and get a banner up along Rogers Place in the rafters there. So I wanted to have a special area in Rogers Place just to recognize these guys and their contribution. Ryan Smith, he never won a Stanley Cup, but he just bled orange and blue. He was an amazing Oiler. He was a guy that fought in the paint. He got those dirty goals. He was a team guy, brought the team together. One of the most beloved Oilers in history. He came in the early 90s, so just after all the glory years ended, of course, but he got to do the 2006 Cup run where the Oilers got within, was it 3 goals of winning the Stanley Cup in Game 7 there, but he was absolutely huge in that playoff run. So there isn't an Oilers fan that you could find that would say a bad word about Ryan Smith. I think he's one of those guys you can say is universally beloved. Didn't do anything wrong. He got traded back in the day in a really controversial trade by then Oilers GM Kevin Lowe. Oilers rectified that a couple years later. Got him traded back from the LA Kings. Unfortunately, I think right before the LA Kings won the Stanley Cup. So I think Smith missed the Stanley Cup there because I think the Kings won 2 and 3 years or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, he just missed the window of getting a Stanley Cup with the LA Kings, which is kind of disappointing. But obviously, it was great to have Ryan Smith back. And Lee Fogelin was, Wayne Gretzky called him one of the most important players in the 80s Oilers. I'm not as familiar, obviously, that was before my time with the Oilers, but I know Lee Fogelin was very big in the 80s Oilers. Really key piece in those guys winning Stanley Cups and bringing those guys together as well. He'd be another one of those great team guys. So, yeah, Ryan Smith and Lee Fogelin, 2 great Oilers and 2 guys very deserving of this honor. So, great to see, and love to be at that game, so see what happens. Maybe I can get tickets for that one, but I'd love to see Ryan Smith recognized there. Definitely one of my favorite Oilers of all time.
Yeah. Okay. So I understand now. This is recognition for the under-recognized.
Yeah. Nice. That was like the Cole's Notes version. I'm sure someone else could go on off on a 2-hour documentary about Ryan Smith, but he fantastic guy. Love him. I was kind of hoping he'd come back and be a part of the organization. Hasn't happened to this point, but great to have him there in the Hall of Fame. Next up on the list, Ryan McLeod finally signed a contract. Been talking about Ryan McLeod signing for about 3 months now, since the end of the season. He's the last guy to sign and the cheapest guy to sign. 1 year, $798,000. Oilers had originally hoped to sign Ryan McLeod to a 2 or 3 year deal. Unfortunately, without making a trade, the cap space just wasn't there to do that. But Ryan McLeod, another guy on the rise. What are your thoughts on Ryan McLeod, Toph?
Yeah, so I'm glad that it's done. I'm glad that we don't have to spend another week or an entire season wondering what's going on with Ryan McLeod. And next week, when we get into our rosters, you'll see that I really want him to have a chance. I know that the 1 year is not what they wanted, but it does afford them the chance to say, okay, Ryan, this is it. Get out there and prove it, and earn whatever we or somebody else is going to give you next year.
Yeah. I think if he comes out and has a great year, he's in a position to ask for even more than he would have gotten on this contract. That's why it would have been really nice to get him to a 2 or 3 year deal, because we could have kept the number lower for us. I don't think Ryan McLeod's going to bust out and have like a 30 goal a year or anything, but hitting 20 goals, I don't think is entirely out of the question. Might be a bit of a stretch. I think he only had 7 goals last year, if I remember correctly, but I think 15 to 20 is definitely a possible, especially if he gets some time in the top 6.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, but no matter what, great to have him back. He's another great young player for us. So looking forward to see what Ryan McLeod can do this year for the Oilers. And of course, following the Ryan McLeod signing, training camp officially kicked off. The Oilers did do physicals before the Ryan McLeod signing, but the ice sessions started on Thursday. So it was great to see all the guys back on the ice. Saw some early lineups. Jesse Puljujärvi was getting a chance with Draisaitl and Hyman, so that was an interesting line we could possibly see going forward. You get a chance to check out any of the training camp highlights or anything like that, Toph?
Yeah, so because I live not in Canada, I live in almost the opposite of Canada. Florida's actually the opposite of Canada, but I think Kentucky's pretty close. I have to dig for everything. So I've seen very few highlights. Like I have to really search for things. And an astonishing amount of video and highlights are blocked by the border, so it's tough. But I'm also just not really a training camp kind of guy in any of the sports that I follow. It feels like, oh, great, awesome, all right, I'm glad you're having a good practice, y'all.
Well, I just think the most exciting thing about it, I mean, overall training camp isn't too exciting. I mean, you want to see where the young guys are at and see how they're playing, and like it gets more exciting when the actual preseason games get going, not so much the on ice practice stuff, because you want to see how the guys look in games, how they're going up against NHL competition, especially towards the latter part of the preseason when the rosters get really close to being set. You can see where guys are at. Others have a lot of guys that you want to see how they're going up against the competition and how they're faring. Dylan Holloway right up there, Philip Broberg. We think he's on the team either way. Dylan Holloway has to definitely earn his way on there, but he's off to a fantastic start. He was terrific in Penticton in the Oilers Young Stars tournament. Beautiful highlight reel goal. I'm sure you saw it. I had it posted in a video there. It was a beauty. So really hoping to have Dylan Holloway break through and make the team, because I think he could just be another exciting player for the Oilers, give the Oilers some more options on the third line. The Oilers can have 3 strong scoring lines, because there's going to be nights where where the teams are going to try and shut Connor down, try and shut Leon down. But if we can have a third line that can go in there, it's like, oh, we're exhausted already from trying to stop you guys. And then there's a third line that we got to take down too. So if the Oilers can at least become a 3-line team, ideally a 4th-line team, but at least a 3-line team scoring wise, they're going to be a very difficult team to stop. They're already there right now, but even more difficult team, because the Oilers have to take down teams like the Colorado Avalanche. As we've seen, I imagine Colorado will be right there again in the Western Conference Final. So if the Oilers can establish some depth now, get that started, it will be huge down the road. Another thing, love having Jay Woodcroft and Dave Manson here right from day one. Having Evander Kane, as we mentioned earlier, right from day one. They don't have to be mid-season additions for the Oilers. I think that'll be absolutely huge. I was mentioned too, Jesse Puljujärvi did an interview yesterday, took accountability for his struggles in the latter half of last season. He had COVID, had injuries, but he wasn't using that as excuses. He admitted he has to be better. He has to seize this opportunity. Your thoughts on Jesse Puljujärvi so far, Toph?
Yeah, so I was actually astonished, given how much we hear about how terrible Puljujärvi is. That almost all of the feedback that we got were like, yeah, I love the Bison King too. And that really made me feel good because, yeah, we love Jussi and we want him to do well. And then that interview where he's like, yeah, I was doing well and then I wasn't. And that's on me. But guess what? I can do well. That's not quite what he said, but yeah, it's pretty close. And yeah, I think that, as I mentioned last week, I think the narrative gets to him sometimes, and that interview made me think maybe he's shrugging it off. I really hope he's shrugging it off because when he's on, he's on.
But like the first half of the last season, he was amazing. I think
Yeah.
he had 15 goals in the first half of last year.
Yeah.
He looked great and he was finishing plays. And it was just really in the second half where I don't know how many times he's standing in front of the net and someone feeds him and then he'd fall down.
Yeah.
Or he'd miss, like whiff on the puck or put it right in the goalie's chest. It was really hard to watch the struggles. Like I really think there's a great player there. He just has to find a way to break through, find that consistency, and if he can do that, he can be another really effective player for the Oilers. There is still talk though. He might not make it through training camp.
Yeah.
I was watching the Oil Stream podcast earlier this evening. Tom Gazzola is putting it at a 70% chance, that's just his personal opinion, that Jussi Puljujärvi isn't an Edmonton Oiler at the end of training camp. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, there has to be two to tango, right? So if the Oilers can't find a good trade partner, Jussi Puljujärvi stays. If he has an amazing training camp, maybe the Oilers are more inclined to keep him.
Yeah, hopefully Jussi takes that step. And yeah, again, maybe it's best for everybody for Jussi to have a fresh start, and I'm sure that whatever deal might be worked would give the Oilers flexibility against the cap. But, you know, is flexibility against the cap worth losing Jussi? Don't know. I'm sure some people are screaming at their wherever they're watching this, going, "Yes, it would be." But we like Jussi.
Yeah, a lot of people want other players to go instead of Jussi, but if it's hard, if they're having this much difficulty trying to move Jussi, players that are even not as talented as Jussi are going to be even harder to move for the Oilers. They're going to have to give up draft picks and stuff. So we'll see what happens there. But either way, hope Jussi Puljujärvi has a breakthrough year, whether it's in Edmonton or somewhere else. Hopefully in Edmonton, though.
Yeah. And so now we start our next segment. Oilers Facts and History. If you have a snappy name for that, you can let us know. But every week we do a weird fact, a fun fact, something about the Oilers. Last week it was about the 50-year anniversary of the WHA somehow miraculously aligning with opening day this year. This week I was doing some deep dive into Oilers history and was shocked. And I know a bunch of you won't be shocked, but I was shocked that the Oilers have not won their division since 1986. That is 5 full divisions ago, if you count the bubble division. Yeah, that's 2 separate Pacific divisions that they have not won yet. And in fact, they've won the cup more recently than they've won the division.
Well, that's the more important thing to win.
It is the more important thing to win. And I'd like to point out that the last time they were second in their division to the Flames, they won the cup. So we got that going for us, which is nice.
Yeah. You hate being second to the Flames, but as long as you beat them when it matters. Like
that's right. That's right. That was such a great series. All right, so we've got a bunch of feedback from y'all, and we've got several of your responses to how did you become a fan. We're gonna rock and roll through some of those right now.
All right, I'll get us started here. First comment from Weed and Wrestling. I agree with your co-host. The cap numbers and contract crunches are the least enjoyable part of this whole endeavor. All the talking about all these numbers like the contracts are normal. LOL. Some people would have to work a decade for that kind of money generated. So it kind of pisses me off in a way. Yeah, I can see where he's coming from there.
Yeah, yeah. Like we just threw out, you know, almost $800,000 in a year as a like really cheap price. But as I responded to Whedon Wrestling, actually on the channel, you know, if your career length is 3 years and it's 20 years of just absolute dedication to get there, like I think that you deserve that bump, right? Um, I don't think most people know the struggles or have ever experienced the struggles of professional athletes getting to that professional level. Um, and I think that in a lot of ways they deserve that money. They're also earning way more than they're getting paid.
Yeah. Well, and you have to remember too. I mean, for some of these guys that like the Connors that make 12 million a year, okay, yeah, they're just fine. But some guys don't make more than 1 million or 2 million, depending on where they play in the lineup throughout their career. And well, yes, at the time, $2 million is a lot of money, but this money has to last them for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Their career is probably going to be over in their early 30s. That's money's got to carry them going forward. That's why you see a lot of guys going to broadcasting and stuff after their career's over,
Yep.
because they still need a paycheck. They didn't make enough as a hockey player.
Right.
So you got to take that into consideration too. But I mean, of course, yeah, like the guys like Connor and now Nathan McKinnon, the new highest paid player in the NHL next year at $12.6 million, just a little bit more than Connor. Just a little bit of a jab there. But Connor will surpass that by at least 3 or 4 million probably on his next deal in a couple years' time. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Won't have the crown for long, I don't think. I might even see Austin Matthews pass him on his next contract, because I think Matthews needs a new contract next year. So see where he comes in at. He might be the new highest paid player for a while.
Yeah. And so we got another message from Whedon Wrestling about, look at all that brand and logo recognition. You are truly ready to explode out of the starting blocks and take this channel to the next level. Thank you for that. Yes, I worked very hard on getting the visuals right there, and we got them even more right this week, and hopefully week to week this podcast gets just that little bit better.
Thank you again, Toph. Like the logos, everything, that's all on you. That's amazing job, and makes the channel look even better, and can't thank you enough for that. So
I love it. It's strategic art, and strategic art is right in that butter zone for me, where I'm like, yeah.
Our next comment was from Andy White. Hi, Patrick. I enjoyed the Rig 72 show with you. I could not hear Toph that was on the show with you. I don't know if his microphone was not working right or his voice was not high enough. Thank you, Andy. So we hope we
can you hear me now?
If it's not right after all this, okay, give us another nasty comment because we deserve it. But yeah. We think we have it fixed going forward here.
Yeah, and I'm always a fan of constructive criticism. And yeah, we figured out after we recorded that the audio was not right. We've got a different setup this week, and hopefully it's going. All the visual things tell me that, yes, we've got it going.
Absolutely. We always take any constructive criticism. So if you got ideas, critiques, anything, let us know in the comments, and we will definitely try to address that if we can and fix it going forward.
Yeah. We also got a comment from Bruce and Pamela Best. Great presentation. Enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to the next podcast. Nice to meet you, Toph. That's me. I'm Toph. Nice to meet you as well, Bruce and Pamela Best. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate the support. So next comment was from Sean Francis. I enjoyed this podcast a lot, and I was wondering if your friend Mike would join you guys or be a guest on the Rig 72 podcast. Well, this podcast will just be Toph and I, but I do plan on possibly doing another podcast with Mike going forward, so keep your eyes out for that. But going forward, Rig 72, Patrick, Toph. I think maybe down the line we might bring someone else in as a special guest or something from time to time, but I'd say 99.9% of the time it's going to be Toph and I on this podcast.
Yeah, I did enjoy that Mike replied to that with, "What a fantastic comment." But yeah, for now it's just the two of us, and mostly, at least on my end, that's about logistics. Each person that you add to any project makes it exponentially more difficult to get everyone at the same time in the same place talking about the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's just easier with two people. I mean, that's why I say there's might be the odd chance we might have like a special guest for like one episode down the line, but like I said, 99.9% of the time it's just going to be Toph and I, possibly 100%. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Next comments from, I hope I say this right, Jimachio. I'm gonna go with Jimachio. They said that they love the pod and they're looking forward to hearing more from us. That's great. Mentioned the audio problem. Hopefully that's rectified. And we got our first, at least in the way that we're reading these, mention of the story of how they became a fan. And they said, "I was born with an orange and blue sweater on. My Oilers fan origin story is quite dull." That's fantastic. Really, like, if you never had a choice and this is just who you are, that's fantastic. Like, we've got stories about how we chose, but not having that choice, that I'm sure you weren't literally born with an orange and blue sweater on, but
well, I wouldn't.
But not having a memory when you weren't an Oilers fan is amazing to me. Not dull at all.
For sure. So our next comment was from Jay Schutz. He had a question, player for player trade. What about Tyson Barrie for Jacob Chychrun? I'd love to have Jacob Chychrun on the Oilers. He'd be another top 4 addition on the left side. Could push Brett Kulak down to the third pairing. Would definitely make the Oilers deeper. Tyson Barrie for Jacob Chychrun is definitely not going to be enough to get that trade done. The Oilers would have to definitely add to Tyson Barrie. But I don't know, have you have much knowledge about Jacob Chychrun, Toph?
Yeah, because I hate the Coyotes so much. And like Chychrun. So it's one of those situations where I know a lot about Chychrun because I like Chychrun and hate the Coyotes. But I think that so on the value side that of everybody else's opinion, that's a 1-for-1 there would be a steal for the Oilers. But watching last year and the effect that Tyson Barrie had on the team, on the ice, I don't know if it would be worth it. Like, Chychrun is better. Chychrun would give depth and strength in a way that the Oilers don't have. But Tyson Barrie did something psychologically to the team, and it really, really helped. And I want to see more of that before we're tossing him out the window and asking for someone else.
Yeah. If the Oilers did do a Jacob Chychrun trade, it probably would have to include Tyson Barrie just to make the money work. I think, if I remember correctly, Chychrun's another $4 million cap hit as well, but Oilers would have to move out something of significance cap-wise to make that trade work. Chychrun would be a great addition, but if you're moving Tyson Barrie, you're making the right side weaker. So to add something more to the left side where you're already kind of stronger, not saying Jacob Chychrun wouldn't be a great addition. He definitely would be, but yeah. Well, we'll see what happens there. All the talk over the summer was that Jacob Chychrun could be headed to the Ottawa Senators, so we'll see what happens there. I think the Senators are still trying to add a defenseman, so it might not be available for the Oilers to take.
Yeah, the Sens look a little bit scary. Just a little bit. And if they can put it all together, they're a lot of bit scary.
They're in a really tough division, though. They got to get past a lot of teams in Tampa and Toronto, and they'll be a better team for sure, but I have a feeling they'll be one of those teams challenging for a playoff spot, but they don't quite get there. But we'll see what happens. We got some good young players. DeBrincat now, Stützle, so they're on their way up for sure.
Stützle. So we got a comment from Deputy 758. They said, interesting podcast. They mentioned the audio again, that they were glad the Kane situation was over, and their story of how they became a fan was they moved to Edmonton in 1980, saw their first Oiler game at the Northlands, and that was their first NHL game live. Prices have rose dramatically since then, by the way. Still have the $16.50 ticket stubs and have been a loyal Oiler fan ever since. So that's a great story. And yeah, if you ever get the chance to see hockey live, if you haven't, it's a totally different game. And whenever people ask, how do you get into hockey? That's how. Go even at the lower levels. If you can see a live hockey game and just watch people moving in ways that people around you usually don't move, it's incredible. And yeah, I know that there are a lot of stories out there that were like, I didn't really care, and then I went to a game and now I'm hooked.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case for a lot of things. You just got to see it live. Like, I saw my very first two Oilers playoff games this past spring, games 3 and 4 against Colorado. Unfortunately, both losses, but just being in that building for playoff time, feeling that energy, just the place was rocking when those guys just came out on the ice to start the game, and cheers. I want to go next year and actually see a win, but
yeah.
Even in losses, they were incredible experiences. Loved every second of it. So it just, nothing beats watching the game live for sure.
Yeah, and if you can sit behind the bench, it's another totally different game because you get to watch all the line changes, and that's something that you don't usually get to see. My first Oilers game in person was in Columbus, and we sat right on the glass, right behind the bench, and watching them just kind of slide, and then they're joking around, and then serious face, and they're on the ice. It's amazing how that all works.
So our next comment is from Michael Barteski, friend of the channel. Absolutely awesome, guys. Love the different segments. Looks crisp. Great content as always. Look forward to this now as well every week. Well, thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. So this week we've got a question for y'all. Is having a second team that you cheer for acceptable? Is it a case-by-case basis? I know where we both stand on this. Patrick, do you want to chime in?
So my second team is the Detroit Red Wings, but they are a very, 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 very distant second. Like, I wouldn't say I watch the occasional Red Wings game. It basically comes from my dad. We were both born in Ontario. He absolutely would not be a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. No chance in hell of that happening. So he listened to Detroit Red Wings games from his home in Chatham, Ontario when he was young. Obviously, you can get the radio reception from there in Ontario, and he was a lifelong Detroit Red Wings fan until he passed away, and just kind of keeping that going forward for him. So Detroit Red Wings are my second team for that reason, but I love them for Dad, but Oilers fan through and through, and Detroit is the distant second team that I will cheer for if the Oilers are eliminated.
Yeah, I've got a number of teams that I like, but only one team that I'm truly invested in. But my second team, which again, just like yours, is a distant second, is the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're as close as I get to a local team here, and they're my brother's top team, and so I want them to do well. I care what they do, but there's a big difference between catching 80 out of 83 games and catching maybe 10 across the season because there were no Oilers games on those nights. So yeah, they are second in my heart, but my heart is very large, and that's a very big distance.
Exactly, yeah.
So
always cheer for them, but yeah.
So is having a second team okay? And if so, who's your second team? That's what we want to hear from you this week.
Yeah. Let us know in the comment section, and you can let us know on Twitter or social media with the hashtag Rig72. So I think we'll wrap it up there for today. Any last words, Toph, before we sound off for today?
One last thank you to everybody for listening and for responding to us. It really does make the show better and make it feel better for us when we're getting immediate feedback from y'all.
Yeah, thanks so much for your feedback, guys. Really appreciate all of your support. And yeah, we're going to keep this going forward every week here. So that's all for today. My name is Patrick.
My name is Toph.
And you've been watching the Oilers Fanatic. Thanks for being a fan.